Walking through Saddam Hussein's largest Baghdad palace complex, it's clear who's in control. The US 3rd Infantry, seemingly unfazed under the unseeing gaze of the palace's former owner. Inside this, the vast Republican palace, US soldiers now show off its charms. And occasionally, sleeping soldiers, catching rest in who knows whose former room. Mostly, though, the floors here are empty, like the rooms, covered in dust and devoid of any furniture.
Well, the whole place is opulent. I'm guessing that all of his palaces are just like this, but as I said, there really wasn't much to find here.
Perhaps the only real hint of any recent presidential habitation, the rotting food in the kitchen and the discarded plastic hygiene glove. The clear out here has been so detailed and so thorough, even down to this. Look, the hinges with the doors taken away. It really begs the question, was Saddam Hussein expecting to come back? Ever planning to come back? Did he think he was going to lose? Is he planning to set up home somewhere else? Whatever Hussein's plan for his palace, it seems the coalition also had theirs. Spared from the attack, it is now an operations base for the infantry. Nearby, in the sprawling city centre palace complex, other regime institutions fared less favourably. Above the door of the ministerial meeting chambers, an ornate lamp dangles dangerously in the breeze. Inside, US troops pick their way through the debris. If ever the people of Iraq needed a more poignant symbol that the old leadership has gone, it can be found here in the rubble of these rooms. Pieces of chandelier scattered on the floor. The rooms that once held meetings with President Saddam Hussein, Tariq Aziz, Vice President Taha Yassin Ramadan, all now gone. For now, though, it seems the only interest many Iraqis would have in these buildings would be to loot them. And perhaps in that, Saddam Hussein knew his people best, clearing his house before they could. Nick Robertson, CNN, Baghdad. In a chaotic hotel lobby, US Marines meet the first Iraqi police officer answering the call to show up for work. Ahmed Zaki Abdul Razak describes himself as the former director of public police, pledging now to work under US Marine supervision.
There will be police patrols that will be designated to different neighborhoods of Baghdad, either tomorrow or the day after.
With Marines still primarily engaged in running down remnants of the former regime and wholesale looting still endemic in the capital, the deal to work with their former enemy is a necessity.
The same thing happened in 1945 in Berlin when the Nazis fell. I mean, you still had people who knew how to run things, who were forced to join the party for employment, but that had the sincere interest of the people at heart. So those are the people we're looking forward to working with.
In some neighborhoods, residents have set up their own checkpoints. And even if they don't agree with the Marines' assessment of good-hearted policemen, the desperation for security is such they'll accept their old force back. The old police weren't good, he says, but having them is better than this chaos. Worse possibly than the chaos, the discovery of a distribution outlet for suicide bombers. 50 ready-made vests packed with explosives, carefully wrapped like so much clean laundry. Several dozen empty hangars, and no indication where those suicide vests might be. In their effort to end the chaos, Iraqi engineers inspecting one of the capital's primary power plants figure they can soon get Baghdad's lights back on. What they need, they say, a way to tell the employees to come back to work, a bus to get them there, and security to convince them it's safe. In the city's hospitals, now crowded with civilian war wounded, the restoration of power would help overwhelmed doctors. Like the engineers, the lack of law and order is keeping many medics at home at a time when they are needed the most. And for all, whether doctor, policeman or engineer, the hard personal dilemma many will face in the coming weeks, whether they can work with the Americans and not consider themselves collaborators. Likely, the policemen returning to the streets with US Marine support will prove a litmus test for others, an early indication of how the new regime will fare. Nick Robertson, CNN, Baghdad. Straining under the weight of shabby furnishings, a car full of looters pulls away from a government ministry. Apparently slim pickings not putting plunderers off. I have no money, says Samir, no furniture in my house. I don't have a pot to cook in, but now I do. Inside Iraq's television station, a similar story. Looters searching harder to get the good stuff. Among this band of would-be rip-off merchants, frustration and anger setting in. We are living in anarchy and chaos, says Ali. Before with Saddam, at least we could sleep peacefully. We need protection. Father of 8, Jihad, shows his military pension card. All the records are gone, he says. Where can I get money to feed my family? None will admit to looting, but as we stand talking, goods gradually fill the trolley behind us, ready to be carted off. This office is typical of what we're finding around Baghdad in the government buildings. Everything has been looted that seems to be just about of any value to the people. This is another videotape, but it wouldn't be useful to anyone at home. This wouldn't work in a home VCR. Unarmed and out on the streets, policemen talk confidently of tackling the often gun-toting looters.
We can do everything. The citizens know how powerful the police are. We can lessen the chaos and control it.
Across the road, SM angrily doubts the claim. They do this just for the cameras, he says. It's a lie. As we stop to listen, a crowd gathers, pouring out their grievances. Emotions are raw, and we are barraged with a plethora of concerns. My baby is dying, says Layla. I told the US soldiers, but they don't care. Saddam was a dog, this man screams, but if the Americans don't help, we will revolt. Armed men are coming to my house and attacking my girls, pleads Najat. I came here to tell the press. Most say they are appealing to journalists because they don't know where else to go. In a tense crowd, Najat calls out to the lone policeman, I want to see you in our neighborhood. This is a catastrophe for you and us, he says, and God willing, will overcome it. As he leaves, the crowd echoes his words, Inshallah. With God's grace, a well-worn phrase here, speaking more to hope than certainty. Nick Robertson, CNN, Baghdad. Fearing factionalism will rob them of power in the new Iraq, thousands of Shia Muslims poured onto the streets of their holiest city, proclaiming unity. We came to deny these rumors that there is infighting among the Shiites, he says. Are these rumors true? He asks the crowd. No, they reply. This was his return after 15 years' exile in Syria, plunging into the charged atmosphere in Najaf, where the abrupt end of Saddam's repression of Iraq's majority Shia community is triggering power plays among its leading clerics. Intrigue no one wants to talk about. rumours mixing with fact, an explosive combination. A few days ago, leading Shiite cleric Abdul Majid al-Khawi, returning from exile in London, was murdered here with a colleague. In this quiet house, a cleric describes the death in detail, denies rumours his faction was involved, but makes clear his movement, led by Muqtada al-Sadr, has the best rationale for dominance.
The Shiites are united behind al-Sadr because he's walking in the footsteps of his father. He is an Iraqi.
Others in this house, who say they are from different factions, emphasize the importance of Shia unity. All want a Shia religious leader running the country and blame outsiders for dividing them.
Americans are not honest with us. We don't know their true intentions. They are allying themselves with one or two groups among the Shiites.
At the ornate Imam Ali Shrine, the holiest place for the Shia, few doubt America's responsibility to provide security. And privately, several top Shia clerics feared talking frankly about the festering factional tensions lest they exacerbate the problem. In this historic city, intrigue is nothing new for its residents. For the occupying US troops, dealing with it will be. Nick Robertson, CNN, Najaf, Iraq. With a smile and a blast at Saddam, Mohammed reopens his bookstore, neighbours quick to point out he's not a looter. After a month's closure, dust thick on the shelves he prudently emptied before he left. Gone so long the clock stopped, but now he says it's time to restart his business. Today it's safer, he says. I didn't hear any tank shells or bullets. Next door, Mohammed the grocer is back at work. Candy and soda, all he can offer for now. At the bakery, war didn't stop Abu Ahmed working, but now he says making bread is getting harder. It's very difficult to do our job. We have a shortage of everything, he says. Electricity, flour, fuel, water, even salt. At the counter, customers wait patiently. But seeing us, many vent pent-up anger at the lack of electricity and security. Most stores here remain locked up and shuttered. Many businessmen, it seems, still feel it's too dangerous to open up just yet. The situation is still far from normal. Increasing their efforts to restore that normality, US Marines are now patrolling some Baghdad streets on foot, a more visible presence designed to help reduce looting. But unlike British forces in the south, these US Marines still in full combat gear. To help restore water and other much-needed services, Marines have been meeting with city planners and engineers. The shift away from fighting the war apparently not stopping the thinly spread US force from its original mission. This day, another weapons cache discovered by the Marines in the center of the capital. Possibly, however, the long days taking their toll. This Marine snatches a quick nap in a chair at Saddam's wife's palace. Most in the city, though, would likely prefer the Marines weren't this stretched, and there were enough to get the job done quickly. Nick Robertson, CNN, Baghdad. Weapons at the ready, faces hidden from the camera. Vigilantes head out on a patrol of Baghdad's most run-down neighborhood. Down streets scarred by decades of poverty, these Shia Muslim gunmen are bringing their brand of law and order to the suburb that was until last week known as Saddam City. A day ago, the sound of running gun battles and ambulance sirens echoed around these streets. Now it appears as if Baghdad's most volatile suburb is pulling back from the brink of chaos. At a nearby mosque, itself under heavy armed guard, the would-be policemen pile up goods liberated from looters. Inside, stolen medical supplies, also retrieved from looters, are dispensed to the needy. The move towards stability in this community of 1.5 million Shias, orchestrated by its religious leaders without the help of US troops.
These men are volunteers to restore security. They are armed not against the people, but the troublemakers backed by the old regime, to finish them off, to restore stability.
For years, those who lived within the confines of this ruinous, sprawling grid of fetid streets chafed against the regime they daren't fight. Their understanding of why they were downtrodden, simple. Today, a quick glance in the market tells all. Rotting fruit, the fare on offer for those accustomed to accepting second best. From those who cluster around our car whenever we stop, Saddam's ouster now setting aspirations to change that old order. We are happy with our leaders, he says. They are organizing the city. We don't want an American military governor. Not all agree with the new order, though, but unlike the days under Saddam, some brave enough to speak out. Much in former Saddam City is far from settled, like the suburb's new name, Sadr City, named after a Shia leader. Like the looting, though, possession seems 9/10 of the law. Nick Robertson, CNN, Baghdad. In Baghdad, one of the hardest habits to break, smoking a traditional Arabic pipe, the ajami, and gossiping with friends. The weirdest rumor, says Walid, a storekeeper, is that Saddam and his sons went to Syria, then Russia, then Britain. Ahmed, the coffee shop owner, disagrees. Saddam is with American intelligence, CNN or CII, or whatever, he says. Rumors to be mulled over, muddled, extended, and amplified. The Americans want our oil, he says, echoing Saddam Hussein's pre-war mantra. But that propaganda pales in comparison with the latest stories. I saw it with my own eyes, he says. The Americans opened the doors of the banks to let the thieves go in. Everyone around seems to agree. Another in the crowd, desperate to get his voice heard, shouts, "A Kuwaiti man with the Americans opened the safe in the bank." With little access to hard information and used to a regular diet of propaganda from the former government's radio and television services, people here appear to be filling the information vacuum now with fears rather than fact. In a more upscale neighborhood where some normality is returning to the streets, those fears fan discontent. The Americans want the chaos here to continue, he says, so we can't govern ourselves and they can justify their occupation. But that isn't all to this particular rumor. Saddam Hussein has been collaborating with the US since 1963, Akil, a businessman, says. It's all a game, to destroy the Arabs to benefit Israel. Saddam is in Washington with Bush, adds Bassem. It's all a game. Amidst the anger and frustration, though, the knowledge that good information is missing. We hear that the Americans want to destroy Iraq, says Hussein, a civil engineer. We want the Americans to prove to us this is not true. Perhaps Carpenter Hafez has the attitude most in the West want to hear. We don't care where Saddam is. All we are concerned about is the future of our country, electricity and water. For now, however, in the absence of hard facts, Hafez and those like him seem to be in the minority. Nick Robertson, CNN, Baghdad. Joyful Iraqis drag a bronze replica of their former leader's head through the streets. Passions swelling with the increasing numbers of people now feeling safe enough to leave home. The impromptu celebration follows the destruction of yet another Saddam statue. It clogs traffic at this now busy intersection as drivers venture back on the roads. Another crossroads in the centre of Baghdad, another effervescent crowd, chasing rumours prisoners of the old regime have been found. In a highway underpass, and by the light of a candle, a man explores a hole many hope might hide missing relatives. Hashim explains to us and to the crowd how his brother Mohammed was taken by the regime in 1985. I've looked in the military intelligence, he says, the Radwaniyah prison, the Salman prison, the Qasir Atesh prison, and one in Karada. Despite the high numbers of people now coming out onto the streets, safety is still far from assured. Gunshots can frequently be heard ringing out. And just a few hours ago, right on this spot, a man was chased down and shot in the legs. With little of value left to steal, looters are settling down to selling their ill-gotten goods. Business seems brisk. Payment, please, in US dollars. Also taking to the streets would be politicians, this one representing the independent Iraqi parliamentarian movement. Like politicians everywhere, he wasted no time asking to get his message out.
We support democracy, independence, and free will for the Iraqi people to build a new Iraq, unified Iraq.
This man was listening intently. There is chaos in Iraq, he says. It has become a massacre, people killing each other. We need politicians and a government to complain to. Possibly timely then that this contender for leadership posts, Ahmed Chalabi, decided the mood was right for his first public speech since returning from exile. Nearby, amidst the smouldering ruins of the last regime, healing from even minor acts of revenge. This pilot Hassan explains how climbing on Saddam's broken statue calms him down. For all venturing out now, a chance, however small, to reconcile with the remnants of the old regime. Nick Robertson, CNN, Baghdad. Rushing down the dimly lit prison corridor, Adnan looks for his room. Blackness as he takes the light into the cell. A gasp. Seemingly overcome, he searches for other clues to his time spent in the dark intelligence headquarters jail. Showing where he used to sit, Adnan explains, "When they brought in breakfast, I knew it was the beginning of another day, and I'd scratch a mark on the wall. 44 days total." As we talk, a cockroach scurries up the wall, and Adnan recalls those days of terror. He tells me he used to dream his mother was there, but he'd wake up and find her gone. Succumbing to the memory, he mumbles how he prayed to God, tears welling up. "I wish they'd destroy this place," he sobs. "They don't need it." But how this 28-year-old came to be incarcerated, something of a well-publicized mystery. In a well-lit hotel room, I show Adnan the videotape of his arrest on January the 25th this year. A record of the morning he jumped into a UN weapons inspector's vehicle and demanded sanctuary. It was the second security incident at the UN headquarters that morning, just as Saddam Hussein's regime seemed to be putting pressure on the UN. At the time, Adnan seemed to play to the camera. Watching the video now, he shows anger that the UN let Iraqi intelligence police take him away. "I had no other refuge," he says. "The Mukhabarat, the intelligence, were watching me, and they'd taken my friend." All because, he says, he voted against Saddam Hussein in the presidential referendum. Back at intelligence headquarters, he shows how his hands were tied, his eyes blindfolded, as interrogators whipped him, asking him questions about his family. As we tour the looted building, he seems to know much a normal prisoner would not know about the layout, implying a familiarity with the intelligence services. Outside his cell, with seemingly well-practiced dexterity, he demonstrates how jailers used to unlock the door. It was at those moments, he says, he thought he would be killed. That he was locked up seems indisputable. Whether for voting against the Iraqi leader or something more complicated is unknown. Freed by the changing fortunes of war, and like everyone here, Adnan looking for a new path. Nick Robertson, CNN, Baghdad. On his first day in Baghdad, heading the U.S. reconstruction of Iraq, retired U.S. General Jay Garner seemed keen to play down local rumors he's come here to rule the country. For now, pulling anything together here can be tough. Even lining up for fuel causes heated debate. Ghassan, the manager of the government-run filling station, weighs in to calm nerves shattered by war and looting. His message for Ghana: relieve the pressure on his station. Use the country's oil reserves, he says, so that all the stations are operating. That will spread hope in the citizens' minds. State fuel truck driver Jassim has a more personal call. Honestly, our salaries are not enough. How can I live on less than $1 a day? Opinions at the pumps, however, on whether Ghana can deliver, divided. We don't accept him, says Kadim. We need an Iraqi. What can he understand about us? We don't know him, says Yaqub. We'll see how he does, and then we'll have an idea. A few miles away, at the state-run Al-Dura oil refinery, Iraqi engineers have just restarted fuel production. Technicians tend government-owned equipment, much of which has seen only sporadic investment since US companies first built the plant in 1952. Keeping this cash-generating industry going, they say, will actually need little help from Ghana. At the gate, oil workers armed with Kalashnikovs keep guard, where less than a week ago they fought off looters. Here at the oil ministry, one of the only Iraqi government buildings where US troops prevented looters destroying the premises, Iraqi officials have already begun talks to choose a new oil minister. Baghdad's self-appointed governor, Mohammed Zubaydi, who is yet to be recognized by Ghana's office, plans sending his deputy as the top Iraqi representative to the OPEC meeting in Vienna this week. For Ghana, likely sorting the leadership post will prove the trickiest of his early tasks, restoring basic services, his most pressing, and reconstruction, the most enduring. No small feat for a man trying to keep a low profile. Nick Robertson, CNN, Baghdad. Carrying pictures of their 7th century religious hero Imam Hussein and chanting his praise, thousands of Iraq's Shia Muslims marched towards his shrine in the holy city of Karbala. The pilgrimage to Imam Hussein's shrine, a newfound freedom for these Muslims who make up almost 2/3 of Iraq's population. For some, several days of walking taking its toll. For Imam Hussein, I'm prepared to go through much more pain, says Saif, because he was a revolutionary who stood against oppression. As history tells it, Imam Hussein, Shia Muslims' first martyr, died horrendously outnumbered in battle just outside of Karbala. For these pilgrims, their trip to the holy city is in part atonement for the failure of their ancestors to come to Hussein's aid. Freedom now to practice the guilt-driven ritual flagellation, picked up with renewed fervor. And freedom to carry pictures of leaders like Grand Ayatollah al-Sadr. He is the martyr of Karbala, says one man. He was killed by the tyrant Saddam Hussein, adds another. On his way to Karbala, Abdul Hussein, a physical education teacher from Baghdad, explains he follows al-Sadr's son. Our religious leaders represent our political ambitions. Whatever they decide, we will follow, he says. Pilgrim Amer goes further. The important thing is for Iraq to become an Islamic State. Although most pilgrimage chants religious by custom, some, like schoolteacher Imad, calling for US troops to leave. This is a religious day, he says, but like Imam Hussein, we take this day to protest against injustice and oppression. At the roadside, some took rest, others got therapy for weary feet. But most, even in the sweltering heat, pushing on towards their religious goal. The first signs of arrival, US-trained Free Iraqi forces. Next, shimmering in the distance, a golden dome. Then, past the bombed-out former intelligence headquarters. And at last, journey's end, entry to one of the shrines. For these devout Shia pilgrims, religious freedom once again discovered. Nick Robertson, CNN, Karbala, Iraq.
حسين بالدماء وويلنا
حيدر 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 حيدر
بروح والدك اخويا اخويا رحمة الله زاير
وظاهركم وباطنكم آمين رب العالمين والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
كربلاء صار السفينة للنجاة، كربلاء صار السفينة للنجاة، كنا ويا حسين نركب وياها. للنجاة كربلاء صار السفينة للنجاة، كنا ويا حسين نركب وياها.
كنا ويا حسين نركب وياها.
كربلاء صار السفينة للنجاة، كربلاء صار السفينة للنجاة، كنا ويا حسين نركب وياها.
وصلنا بحفنا برويبان وقال انا المرجلة راعيها.
كربلاء صار السفينة للنجاة، كربلاء صار السفينة للنجاة، كنا ويا حسين نركب وياها.
الحواشي مش عاينين احسن صفات، والحواشي مش عاينين احسن صفات، والانصار مو بقصنا وليها. استشهد ويعلى وفيرة دومامات والأرواح الفاطمة نفديها
كربلاء صار السفينة للنجاة كنا ويا حسين نصطفيها
من العيون
واحد السفينة للنجاة كنا ويا حسين نصطفيها زينب لي شاشة الفرات زينب لي شاشة الفرات بدعان الكرار ما تروي زينب لي شاشة الفرات
Even before first light, the Shia devout already showing their faith in large numbers. With dawn, the most pious, executing religious rituals of guilt and atonement, cutting and slapping themselves with swords. A freedom of expression not allowed under Saddam Hussein. But the festival to mark the killing of a 7th century religious leader, not just giving Iraq's largest community its first opportunity in decades to show the depth of faith, but also providing it a political platform. This speaker leading anti-Saddam and anti-American chants. Themes picked up with fervor by the excited crowds. This being the United States, of whom most here are deeply suspicious. He tells me we don't want to offend, but they should leave now. A message being pushed by these religious leaders returning from exile in Iran, who point to the success of the celebrations as proof they can organize themselves.
We do not believe there is a need for an American military governor. The power could just be transferred to the Iraqis.
A few feet from the throngs, Saif, who describes himself as a worker, reads his Quran in quiet contemplation. Our religious leaders have to fill the political vacuum, he says. They are the most knowledgeable. They have to be our political leaders. On the steps of this shrine, the call for religious leadership finding support. Amidst the fervour of the day, hard to tell how many would actually vote along religious lines, but as the celebrations begin to wind down and Shia religious leaders plot their political path forward, many of the faithful leaving here will likely feel they have begun to recover some of their long repressed voice, a voice that is only now beginning to reverberate around the rest of the world. Nick Robertson, CNN, Karbala, Iraq. Even before first light, the Shia devout already showing their faith in large numbers. With dawn, the most pious, executing religious rituals of guilt and atonement, cutting and slapping themselves with swords. A freedom of expression not allowed under Saddam Hussein. But the festival to mark the killing of a 7th century religious leader, not just giving Iraq's largest community its first opportunity in decades to show the depth of faith, but also providing it a political platform. This speaker leading anti-Saddam and anti-American chants. themes picked up with fervour by the excited crowds. This being the United States, of whom most here are deeply suspicious. He tells me we don't want to offend, but they should leave now. A message being pushed by these religious leaders returning from exile in Iran, who point to the success of the celebrations as proof they can organize themselves.
We do not believe there is a need for an American military governor. The power could just be transferred to the Iraqis.
A few feet from the throngs, Saif, who describes himself as a worker, reads his Quran in quiet contemplation. Our religious leaders have to fill the political vacuum, he says. They are the most knowledgeable. They have to be our political leaders. On the steps of this shrine, the call for religious leadership finding support. Amidst the fervour of the day, hard to tell how many would actually vote along religious lines, but as the celebrations begin to wind down and Shia religious leaders plot their political path forward, many of the faithful leaving here will likely feel they have begun to recover some of their long repressed voice, a voice that is only now beginning to reverberate around the rest of the world. Nick Robertson, CNN, Kabul, Iraq. Sign language to rescue a family trapped under rubble. Sergeant Major Coker of the 101st Airborne, desperate to help. And for a while, the crowd clambering on the rubble of this house follows his orders. Doing his best to undo the damage this crowd says he's responsible for. An errant missile from a burning US-controlled weapons dump nearby. As they work, anger erupts as the missing family's breakfast is found. We warned the US soldiers 4 days ago not to store the weapons close to these houses, he says. A body is pulled out and reality and pressure crash in on Sergeant Major Coker. Frustrations rising on both sides. 13 people were killed and only one survivor. This is illegal, he says. Efforts continue. A call for an English speaker to translate. Communications breaking down. Coker retreats.
People don't understand what's happening.
I know they don't understand. Neither do I.
What's happening, sir?
There's a little resentment. They don't wish us to help.
America. This is freedom. This is freedom. Speaking America.
We didn't do this.
This?
A civilian shot a flare into the ammunition dump and set it up. I have soldiers that are hurt too. We didn't do this.
The shouting continues to anyone who will listen. What do these people have to do with this falling here, he says. talk Arabic, he begs. Misunderstandings rule this day.
They have to work with me. I have to.
Sergeant Major Coker tries again.
If you will help me talk to them, I will do everything I can.
This time, the armoured bulldozer brought in. Progress looks possible. But the crowd turns on them again, forcing another withdrawal. This time, Sergeant Major Coker's frustration obvious. Miscommunication possibly this soldier's greatest danger. Nick Robertson, CNN, Baghdad. Outside Baghdad's Yarmouk hospital, a father arrives carrying his dead son. What is all this for, he anguishes, slumping his dead child on his car as he shows how a stray bullet took the boy's life. Inside, a family grieves at the side of their dead mother, whom doctors had been unable to save from a kidney disorder. Power only the beginning of Dr. Nakash's difficulties. Some hospital wards battle damaged, others looted. Just the tip of Iraq's healthcare problems, according to aid workers. A few miles away, and under pressure to improve the situation, Iraq's new civil administrator, Jay Garner, met with academics and leaders to discuss Iraq's future. Away from cameras, talks were described by coalition sources as spirited and emotional. This delegate left unsatisfied.
It was only a meeting to present some ideas. We didn't have enough time, and we left with the hope of having another meeting.
Later, Garner predicted a quickening pace towards democracy. In a chilling reminder of the past, some of Saddam Hussein's family videos came to light. Here, the former president is seen walking in northern Iraq with his first wife Sajida in 1989. Here, celebrating his 50th birthday party in 1987. Perhaps memories of better days, a younger, fitter, happier-looking Saddam kissing Sajida goodbye before she took off for a shopping trip to Cairo. And these pictures of Saddam Hussein's elder son, Uday, feeding his pet lion cubs, and for the first time he can be seen using a walking stick, a legacy of a 1996 assassination attempt. And here, the first family's children and grandchildren gather for New Year. Nowhere do these tapes hint at what may have become of the former Iraqi leader, something that troubles many here today, fearing he and his family may return. Back at Yarmouk, more pressing matters. A new Iraqi has just entered the world. More pressure on all to right this struggling nation. Nick Robertson, CNN, Baghdad. Tariq Aziz's son Ziad looks worried. He's willing to talk with us, but not be interviewed. As he explains how his father negotiated his surrender to US forces, he plays with his son, Tariq Jr. He says his father's nighttime handover was dignified, that US forces offered medical support for his father's heart condition that has caused 2 heart attacks recently. They don't know when to expect him back and have been told he faces lots of questions. Outside, US troops provide occasional protection. Nearby, Siad, a neighbour, hopes all will be well. Saleh, also a neighbour, comes to our car to give his opinion. He was a normal person, he says, a good neighbour, but a bad politician. At their nearby store, Talal and Yahi prepare to open for their first day's business since the war. Aziz was a politician, says Talal. It's Saddam and the others Americans have problems with. Maybe he gives us information about the missing people, says Yahi, and perhaps Saddam Hussein. Further down the road, Yusuf and Muthan wait for a ride. Neither have anything bad to say about Aziz. We call him Mr. Aziz, and I'm proud of him, says Muthan, a former traffic cop. He was cultured, and I wish someone like him rules us. His friend Yusuf adds, if all the leaders stayed in Baghdad, then the Americans will catch them. Across town, in a less affluent neighbourhood, reactions to Aziz's arrest are profoundly different. I didn't hear about it, explains Jassim, the egg seller, because we didn't have electricity. When we explain the news to the crowd, Hisham, a bystander, steps forward. America is playing a trick on us, he says. Where is our government and our security? At the pickle stall, passions are inflamed by the lack of services. Aziz is a war criminal, says Ahmed. He should get the death penalty, just like Saddam, 60 times over. We give Mr. Bush 6 months to get things right, says Abbas, going on to explain. If not, we will fight the Americans.